Well, hello, hello, hello. Here we are. I am with the one and only Adam Lawrence, who some of you who've been around me for a while will know that me and Adam sort of know each other. We sort of worked together a few years ago, but Adam is very well known in the property circuit, in the property world. He is a multiple business owner. He runs the Boardroom Club, which is an SME consulting firm for like a boardroom advisory from SME businesses. But most of us will know him as a landlord, a very, very active landlord who's been in the landlord community and very outspoken in the landlord community for quite a few years as well. So he really is the man to know. And I saw a little post that he put out a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the changing of the guard in the landlord ownership space. And I thought, I've been seeing the same thing. So I thought it'd be a great idea out of me and you could have a chat and talk about the changing of the guard, your perception, my perception. And really, for those of us that are working in this sector, particularly for my audience, letting agents, what are landlords thinking right now? What's happening right now? What can we do to support and where's it going? And I think that's what we're all really quite concerned about. So I'm going to kick off with you first of all. That post you put out, Adam, changing of the guard. What do you mean by that?
Thanks for the intro, Sally. In my world, I'm talking about movement from individual, small, mom and pop, as they would call it in the US, kind of landlord style stuff. One, two, three, four properties, maybe aggregated over a number of years, possibly self-managed, often self-managed, moving over to selling up, either selling to bigger corporate landlords with bigger ambition, bigger plans, perhaps maybe 20, 30 years younger, because there's definitely a generational gap in the sellers and the buyers at the moment, of course. And then the bigger landlords, the institutional style landlords like the BlackRocks and everybody on downwards of the world as well. So a shift from smaller number of properties owned per entity to more properties owned, fewer entities, more properties owned. So consolidation from the asset ownership perspective, first of all, Sally.
It certainly does feel like that, doesn't it? It feels like with clause 24, which has affected a lot of landlords, for those that listening that don't know, is the taxation is paid on interest on your properties, and you're paying tax on money you haven't even had, which is affecting a lot of people. And of course, there's been lots of changes recently as well. A lot of people now coming into the market are buying as part of limited companies. Just tell us about that, Adam. What is the strategy now that landlords are using to buy that's different to how perhaps people would have bought 20 years ago? How do we recognize that, a different landlord?
Yeah, yeah. Your conventional advice 20 years ago would have been if you're holding on to it, do it in your own name to rent out. Perhaps if you were doing a lot of flips and generating income, because that wouldn't count as capital gains tax for a personal tax holder, then use a limited company. And then that was turned on its head, as you said, by good old George Osborne, 2015 budget, decided that people would pay effectively tax on turnover rather than tax on profits. And the way to get around that was to shield those profits or not profits, as you said, that turnover in a limited company and pay the lower corporation tax rate of 19%. Of course, you've still got to pay more tax when you extract it from the company, but certainly in terms of being able to grow a portfolio, it's very handy to have that company at paying a lower tax rate to reinvest funds and reinvest funds. And it's also there's a near cottage industry these days in also how to sell those limited companies, because the stamp duty has gone from 5% to those buying in their personal names or in their companies. But if you buy a company, you're only paying 0.5% stamp duty on the value of the shares. So that's a 10 times difference these days, Sally. Of course, that makes a big difference as well.
That is a big difference, isn't it? It's massive. And I know we've spoken to so many landlords now as well that, they bought, because I was helping landlords very actively between 97 2002, which is a long time ago now, but 25 to 30 years ago. And, these people now, their mortgages are coming to an end. A lot of them had interest only. They've now got to remortgage. I mean, even the mortgage world has changed, hasn't it? These mortgage application fees that are like 14, 15, 18,000 pounds, and these tracker rates, and you've got to have it for 2 to 5 years and then remortgage again. And to a lot of them that are probably coming towards retirement age, it's really difficult to navigate. That's what we're seeing. It's just like, I just can't be bothered, Sally. I just can't be bothered. Is that something that you're seeing or feeling in the landlord community at all?
Well, I think it makes sense actually, because especially if you have been holding assets for 25 to 30 years, the amount of risk is going up significantly this year because of renters' rights. The amount of effort that you need to put in is going up significantly. And if you're using mortgages, the returns aren't very good at the moment because of these big fees and all the rest of it. So it's pretty rational as an investor to therefore think, well, hold on. If I'm putting in more effort and I'm taking more risk, I really would like to get more return, not less return. And of course, we're
Mm.
not really helped on that front, or everybody's not helped, including the tenants, on the back of sort of 3 years where capital growth has been pretty ordinary slash down if you're in London, sideways, and up a little bit if you're in, some of the if you're in God's country like we are, Sally, then you've done a little bit better than that, but not a lot. It's not like we've seen a huge bump since COVID, and we have seen a lot of inflation as well. So it does make sense.
Do you see much of an effect in the market from a landlord's perspective with the corporates? And I mean the big Lloyds Bank, for example, buying a lot of
Mm.
properties with the large corporates. Are you seeing them competing with normal landlords buying properties, or are they more build to rent? What are they up to?
So Citra, Lloyds do buy secondary market assets. It was a big surprise, a big eyebrow raise when that was announced. Certainly
Mm.
spoke to people inside Lloyds. I've got accounts with Lloyds who said, well, this won't ever happen. And, Citra have got 8,000 units now. So it definitely did happen. I think their first acquisition was a block of 50 flats in Peterborough. So that probably tells you, A, Peterborough, that's interesting, but probably not a bad investment area. Good yield. If they're looking to make running yield, it makes sense. But two, that's the sort of scale of stuff they're looking at, freehold blocks of 50 flats. So, no, not competing with individual landlords at the moment. And I don't think will be until perhaps AI moves on to a stage where they're much more concerned about individual single house asset management than managing a block. I'm not sure they're right about that, to be honest, Sally, but my portfolio reflects a lot of single family homes. So I would say that, wouldn't I? But I have managed to buy single family homes in ones and twos, and bought a few portfolios as well, and have aggregated them effectively. And that the single family homes are the best ones, in my opinion. But there we go. But yeah, there's definitely appetite to go into the secondary market, but you have to bear in mind these sorts of some of the funds that I've been talking to. I've talked to a few about helping them with acquisition, but they come in with, well, let's put a toe in the water at 100 million quid. What can you buy me? Can you deploy me that 100 million quid in 12 months? And look, the answer is yes, within reason, but what are the parameters? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And what sort of due diligence are we talking about? What legals are you requiring? And they don't really know the answer to all this stuff yet, which suggests to me that it's still concept driven at the minute. And they know that there's not money being made in London and the Southeast on yields anyway, as a general rule. So they know they've got to seek out those of us in the sort of Midlands and the North and things like that. So they definitely like the idea. They like the numbers on paper, but the operationalization, they're not the ones that I've been speaking to anyway. They're not yet there yet. And they're looking at student HMOs, purpose-built student accommodation, and possibly properties that are leased to housing providers on long leases, and then some of the more niche areas like supported social and things like that. They're not yet ready for the what we would call the good, honest secondary buy-to-let private tenant PRS market. They're not ready for it yet.
It's interesting. I can remember a talk at, I think it was the NAA conference about 8 years ago, and they were talking about how at the time the government had a plan that corporate landlords, as in what you were talking about, large corporate scale landlords, would be the new landlord emerging into the next decade. And they did a comparison of corporate landlords in Germany. And they said, well, they've been banging on about that in Germany for decades, and they've only managed to get to 17% of all housing stock being large corporate landlords. And I can remember at the time thinking, I can't really imagine these big corporates buying that flat over there and that house down there and that three-bed semi and that terraced house. Because if you think about it, it's like buying a business, isn't it? People that come with a lot of money want to buy businesses. They want to buy large businesses because one transaction, it's easier than buying 10 small ones. So it sort of makes sense what you're saying. But where does that leave us with the mom and pop type properties? And I just want to talk about what Trump has just done. I mean, he's just banned or talked about ban or was planning on banning large corporate landlords from buying mom and pop houses. I sort of heard that, and I must admit I haven't well read it, but I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. Do you think that might happen here or?
Yeah, it would fly in the face of the last 10.5 years of government policy from either party, let's face it. But we have to bear in mind, look, the US market is different. They have what they call multifamily that we would call apartment living. They have much more multifamily. And his words were very chosen very carefully. We don't want them owning single family homes. There's an outfit called Invitation Homes who set up in 2012 in the States who bought 50,000 properties in 4 years, completely refurbed the guts out of them. And they were in the secondary locations like Atlanta and Chicago and Phoenix and places like that. So there was strong yields. And then they floated on the stock exchange. So they did that very deliberately. They did that house by house. They did that piecemeal to get those big discounts in. So they very much are only in the single family home space. So Invitation Homes, their share price took the biggest kicking when Donald Trump said what he said. If you look at multifamily in the States, lots of that is owned by Blackstones and BlackRocks and REITs in general, people like that, real estate funds, real estate investment trusts, that sort of outfit, because they can buy exactly what you just said, like buying a company. They can buy a nice big block, 200, 300, 500, 1,000. It's next best thing to building it. So they think is buying it secondhand. Quite a lot of these have been built to rent in the first place, and it's just changing hands anyway between funds. And they're happy with but you have to bear in mind that only really covers a certain slice of the demographics. So as you all know, when you talk about build to rent, you're talking about rents that are well above the market rent that you or I would be charging for anything. And it's housing people who've got a nice corporate job in their 20s, usually, or early 30s, who are man and woman about town sort of types, really. Then you've got all your student stuff that we already mentioned, which is specialist. And we're seeing more senior living kind of specialist niche products as well. But the big mass market is still not covered by all of that. So Blackstone were very quick out with a statement that said, look, we only own 0.05% of single family home stock in the US. So if you think that's 1/20th of 1%, then that's only going to be, it's not going to move the needle, really. So it's more of a political statement than it is something that's going to be highly effective. But what will be effective at the same time is him announcing that he was going to order the government-sponsored enterprises to buy 200 billion of mortgage-backed securities, because that directly influenced the interest rate downwards. And again, like you say, policy-wise, and it's quite often the case with Trump, perhaps not foreign policy, but perhaps we shouldn't go there. But some of his domestic policies are all about, as he would say, making America great again. And it might help a few people. But I don't think Blackstone like their share price going down 5% very much. But perhaps he doesn't care about the corporate interests as much. That's always been his value proposition.
Interesting, isn't it? And what's your thought on the service accommodation? Because I remember being a couple of years ago up in Scotland, and they were talking about how they were putting a limited number of licenses in Edinburgh, for example. And of course, the service accommodation landlords were fighting against the B&B hotels, small hotels, B&Bs as well. And there was only so many licenses, and then there was all this debacle. And then I know in Wales they're increasing the council tax for service accommodation properties. I know some people have ran them as businesses, and then it's like now they're coming into clause 24, and it's what's going to happen here? Do you think there's going to be a bit of an exodus from the service accommodation market, from some landlords going back into the standard market, or do you think they'll just leave? What's going to happen there, do you think?
Well, I think or if you look at the surveys, which tend to focus on landlords' intentions, don't they? So intentions are one thing and actions are another. But they do tend to say 30 to 40% are considering selling. And if they then look at selling, will they then rent it out again if they don't get the price that they want? Because what people maybe aren't realizing at the moment is, if everybody wants to sell at the same time, certainly, although the prices haven't really dropped, because the amount of stock there's been on the open market on the estate agency side in the past 12 months, prices haven't progressed too far in too many places either, because there's lots to choose from, and you've really got to stand out as a proposition to sell a house at a reasonable price. You price it well, you will sell it, but well maybe means you're giving away 3 to 5%, maybe more if you're unrealistic on your price in the first place. So people coming back from serviced accommodation, I would expect it, because There was definitely a point where, those some of those people did really well during COVID. But there's oversupply in some areas, without a shadow of a doubt. And by the time, again, going back to my effort argument, you've got your OT, your online travel agencies to consider. You've got maybe if you've got management in place, you might only see 30 to 40% of the top line revenue. And then you've also got to be comfortable with the volatility of the income. So I think it's a bit of a, you might have tried it and you don't like it. And if you did do it specifically because of Section 24, as you correctly say, with that advantage taken away, if you've got an HMO and it's in an Article 4 area, then arguably you've definitely got a higher value property because people can't compete with it. If you're going to introduce planning, but your service accommodation unit doesn't make any money, it doesn't help you if it's a C5 unit, does it? Because you don't want it to be. You want it to stay as a C3 unit. So look, I think you can always, or certainly from what I see, in when we're talking about rental properties, I kind of assume we're talking about the cheaper end of stock as a rule, although obviously that still might be 250, 300K these days, definitely in the Midlands. That stuff still sells pretty well and the market's pretty liquid. So most have got that as an option if they want to take it. But you've also said earlier on, and we have to be honest, if you put that together with you've owned for 30 years, you might be sitting on a horrible capital gains situation if you've never incorporated. And so you're stuck. You wouldn't put the money into that property today at the price that it is, but if you sell it, you're not going to realize 130 grand, you're going to realize 42 grand. And therefore you're a bit annoyed at that huge tax bill you've got lurking in the wings. So it's not, as you said, it's not easy, and these decisions are getting harder and harder for people. And there is that organic, the buy to let true boom, sort of 2002 to 2013. It's 25 to it's 15 to 25 years ago now. And if you think people started getting involved when they're in their 30s and 40s, naturally they're in their 50s and 60s and perhaps 70s now. And it's just a timing thing that happens to people as well. And you might be just fed up of, if you tried to plan your tax around what Rachel Reeves decides she's doing at the budget, I don't know how you'd have time to do any work, Sally, to be honest with you, because it would feel fruitless because you move a chess piece here and then
It
the rug's
changes
pulled away from you there. Yeah. And all
just
you're
like
all
that.
you're doing is keeping your tax advisor in clover,
We're
realistically.
buying a
Yeah.
farm. We're not buying a farm. Yes, we are buying a farm. What are we doing?
Exactly that. Exactly that.
It's fascinating. So let's have some positivity. So you're a landlord. Are you still buying? Are you still looking to buy properties? Are landlords still buying? What's going on out there? From a letting agent's perspective, what are you guys doing?
Well, from a positivity point of view, absolutely, because some of the discounts we're seeing are some of the best discounts we've seen, to be honest with you. The number of units is shrinking on availability. So that means, especially in locations where there is still affordability headroom for the tenant, rents are going to keep on going up and up and up. So letting agency fees are improving on percentages and things like that, of course, as well. I spoke to certainly someone who I know from Agent Rainmaker, who very kindly shared a bit of his data with me and said that of all the sales they've done, and they've done a lot of landlord sales in the past 12 months, but 84% had been to other landlords.
That's
So
good. That's
they've
good.
had a nice fee out of that, right?
Mhm.
And they've kept the unit, which is better than lose. It's better to keep one than to bring one on board. Let's face it. So that's got to be a big win, really, for them. And that sort of 5 in 6 figure probably feels about right. When we do sell some occasionally, sometimes because perhaps they're in Wales and we're not mega confident with the direction of government policy in Wales at the moment. We tend to seek out first time buyers as a rule because they're much more motivated and they usually will pay a bit more than an investor will, generally speaking. But this is a brilliant time to be, there's more tenanted stock and it's so badly misunderstood. So to give the audience a rough idea of what I see, and it's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in property. It's so big, I shouldn't even say, Sally. I should keep it to myself, to be honest. But I will
Go
say,
on.
right, a, 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 a landlord a potential landlord sees a property in an auction or in an agency window, yeah, and it's tenanted, and they immediately think, especially if it's in an auction, well, they must be dumping it because the tenant's a nightmare, right? If you actually seek that landlord out and speak to them, you'll find 9 times out of 10, it's because they don't want to evict the tenant They've had the property for 30 years, sort of thing, as you've said. They've made plenty of money out of the rent. There's plenty in the capital growth, and they don't mind leaving a little bit on the table for the next buyer. Well, what an opportunity for your audience to be brokering these sorts of deals to people,
Hmm.
right? And the one thing I think is badly misunderstood in that space is the length of the tenancy, right? The length. Because if a tenant's been in a property 8 years, it's unlikely they're not paying and they're treating the property terribly, because even the softest of landlords have probably moved them on by then, right? So, in a way, and I don't mean people should be equated to balance sheets and all the rest of it, but that tenant is an asset. They're not a liability, right? You've got a lot now. If you're an agent who already manages that property, obviously you can add extra value. But if you know the agent selling that property, you can call them up, get a sale for them, get a client for yourself, charge for the acquisition, charge for a nice acquisition fee. And the obvious sale to the client is, well, look, guys, money from day one here, right? Better the devil you know. This is a good tenant. This is the due diligence that we've done. We've got this through our network. I've even negotiated you a little bit of a discount, which is going to more than pay my fee. What's not to like? Because, like you say, the buyers are out there,
Hmm.
and we were chatting briefly before, weren't we, in terms of just how much more important I think it is for agents to be on the front foot and telling the landlords, look, guys, I remember when we did some work together years ago. 324 regulations were, I don't even know what that number is these days, Sally, but I'm guessing it's in the fours and 500s or whatever it is. But the penalties and the downsides are so much more. So you want a good, solid agent with a great reputation to be keeping that risk side of things from the door, don't you? And just as a little bonus that I see for the agents out there at the moment as well, the business case for rent guarantee has become fabulous,
Mm.
utterly fabulous,
Massively,
because
yeah.
rent guarantee companies should. I hope they don't listen to this podcast, Sally, but they should have doubled their prices. The premium should be doubling, right? Because there's more risk. Yeah. Okay. Edit that bit out, Sally. Edit that bit out. But
Edit.
but but you can understand how, as an agent, I think you should be ringing everybody you've got on your list and saying, look, it's time. And all your let only landlords who've been holding off for years and doing it themselves, they need to stop this, Sally. They need to stop it. They need to
Mm.
take a break, pay you for doing it. And that is just the only sensible way to go forward. Otherwise, they might as well sell up, quite frankly.
It's interesting actually what you're saying because about landlords selling and landlords buying. I don't recall ever being approached by a landlord saying, "Have you got any landlords wanting to sell?" It's not really something that tends to happen. Just a couple of stats for you is that 25% of landlords that have a tenant vacating, so their tenants moving out,
Yep.
25% who get 10 in a month, two and a half, 25% will sell. In this
Right.
period between Renters' Rights Act, we're expecting that to go up. But 25% of vacating tenant landlords are selling their property. What an opportunity for buyers to buy a tenanted, happy tenant, happily paying the rent, fully occupied property. It's crazy, really, why we're not delivering more of a service helping landlords buy fully tenanted properties. What tends to happen, as I'm sure you know, Adam, is because I know you've got some letting agents as well, is bet you don't let them do this, but landlord says, I want to sell. Oh, I'll pass you to the sales department. The sales department says, well, we'll have to serve notice on your tenant to get vacant possession. Then it goes on the market. No, don't do it like that. Find buyers and put the two
Yeah.
together and charge a fee. It's just crazy. I don't get it.
It,
It's,
it it really is, and like you say, that opportunity is as golden as it's ever been in the time that I've been in property selling.
Mm. So does it feel from a landlord's perspective, does it feel exciting now? You said that you're getting some really good prices at the moment, probably the best discounts you've been getting. You're getting good returns now as opposed to what you were previously. The opportunities there, if it's structured right. Is that what you're saying from a landlord's perspective?
Yeah, very much so. And even some of the limited companies that have started since 2015 and George Osborne's worst efforts, or whatever you want to call them, they're also in the market for sale. So if you're brave and bold enough, buying limited companies is and you've got the pockets deep enough, buying limited companies is also an option. And they're nice because they're all wrapped up, ready, compliant. You've got accounts history, you've got all the rest of that. There's usually a favourable tax bit in there for someone, which helps to sweeten the deal, whichever way it's working. So yeah, more exciting than it's ever been, I think. And while look, it's the old. There's two things to consider, really, aren't there? Warren Buffett always said, "Be greedy only when others are fearful." So we're there, right? This is the time, and there's more on the table, as I say, than I've seen for a long, long time in deal. People are so red, even since probably just before the 2024 budget. It was the first time I noticed where people would come to me in a conversation and they'd have told me the six reasons they wanted to sell before I even needed to open my mouth. And I was just like, I'd just nod along and say, right, so well, yeah, we're still managing to grow the portfolio, so we're interested. You understand where the pricing is because of what's going on. Everyone's happy. There we go. I would have liked a bit more, but there we go. And it's like, well, we'd all like a bit more, wouldn't we? But yeah, it's honestly, I don't want to sort of, I don't want to say it's easy to buy because there's always challenges around getting the right stuff. But ultimately, that's what the agents are also there for. They're local experts. They know their patches. They know where to direct people. They know what return. What you can't do is direct people into properties that yield 4 and 5% because they won't stack up. So you know what you need to deliver. Your service is valuable. Everyone's got less time than they've ever had before anyway. There's a wall of money out there that still wants to be in property, which is where a lot of the new corporates that you were talking about are coming from. People
Mm,
still believe, and I agree with them, what's going to happen to prices over the next 5 or 10 years? They'll go upwards. They'll at least go upwards by inflation, which has been high over the past few years, as we know. An inflation return isn't bad when you've got net rent and all the rest of it as well.
amazing. So if a letting agent has got a landlord that wants to sell and they've owned it in their own name for 20 odd years and they're going, I've had enough, I want to sell, what couple of lines could you give to them to talk them out of it, or shouldn't they? What do you think they should do?
Well, I
What could
would
they
first
say?
of all say to them, have you, Roger, or whatever the gentleman's name is, or the lady's name is, how much are you going to get in your pocket when this is all done? Right. And what are you going to do with it? And I mean that very seriously because I see lots of landlords all the time saying, I've sold these houses. Now what am I going to do with the money? And I always say, well, surely you should have thought of that first before you sold these houses and paid the tax. So do you know how much tax you're going to pay? Because most people, the thing they want to do, the very, very least of all is pay the tax aside from anything else. And I encourage everybody to look at realizable returns. There's no point saying it's worth 300. I only owe 100 on it these days, so there's 200 grand there. There really isn't, right? Not if you bought it at 40 grand way back when, right? There's plenty to come off the top of that. So help them out thinking about the tax front. Perhaps refer them to an accountant or similar if they need one. If you've got a professional services relationship with someone, especially if you're a commercial relationship with someone on that basis, that's handy. And I'd also say to them, look, there's very possible that we can find you a nice buyer. What you'll be able to do. So let's say we did evict the tenant. Well, they don't all go on the day and might have to go to court and all the rest of this stuff, which obviously is true apart from anything else. But it's not just that. It's when it's empty and then it's got to sit on the market for sale. Do you know the average house in the UK takes 193 days to get to completion? Well, that's nearly 7 months with no income, but also these days it's double council tax and it's this and that and the other. And that's costing you £1,000 a month, Roger. Have you got that £1,000 a month set aside from your rent savings? That's 7 grand to think about before we have to
Mm,
touch it up because we didn't see when they moved the sofa that this needed doing and that needed doing. Or perhaps I can get you a nice buyer, right, who might give you a fair price for it. You'll keep your rental income till the day of sale, yeah, and everybody's going to be happy. What do you
mm.
think about that, Roger?
Much better deal. Sign me up, Adam. Sign me up.
Sell me this pen. That's what that reminded me of, Sally. Sell
I'm
me
not
this pen.
selling. I'm keeping my property. I love it. Adam, you've been amazing. So if anybody wants to reach out to you or contact you, how could they find you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you look me up, Adam Lawrence on LinkedIn, that's the best way. I've got a couple of YouTube channels. I talk a lot about the property market, which won't surprise anybody, and the macroeconomic implications of everything that's going on, including some of Mr. Trump's activities. That's kept me busy over the last 12 months or so. So if you Google Proponomics, you'll find my YouTube. It's got an X on the end, Proponomics. But LinkedIn's the best way to reach out, connect, drop me a message, and hopefully say how much you enjoyed listening to us talk, Sally, which I certainly did.
No, it's been great fun. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam, for coming and joining me today. It's always great to hear from our perspective, being letting agents, to see how our landlords feel. And you've given it a positive spin, which I'm telling you what, we need that right now. So thank you so much. It's been really, really awesome. Thank you, guys. Hope
All
you
the
enjoyed
best.
it.